kind of a general Q&A panel. I'm joined by a couple of other OU medical students, so I'd like for them to go ahead and introduce themselves for right now. So, Jack, can you lead us off?
Yeah, for sure. I know it says John Malone, but I go by Jack. I'm a second year medical student. Um, let's see, I went to University of Oklahoma for undergrad, biology major, and I do not know what specialty I want to do yet, like Eric. So undecided is what I would say. And interests, I like to cook. Cooking is very fun for me. So
Hi everyone, my name is Aditi Gandhi. I'm currently a first year at OUCOM. So I went to undergrad at Northwestern and I was also a psychology major, so woohoo to Eric. I'm also not sure what specialty I want to do yet. And in terms of interests, I love reading and playing music. I play piano and guitar.
Hi guys, my name is Amber. I am currently an MS2 at OU. I majored in biomedical engineering in undergrad, and I was actually a Rev Up pre-med student, I think 3 years ago. So I was in your guys' shoes not too long ago.
All right. I don't think we have any other panelists, and we've actually got a PowerPoint prepared for all of you. This PowerPoint kind of goes over the general timeline and process for applying to medical school. So that's kind of the focus of today's talk. Let me go ahead and pull that up, and I ask that you all not judge the absurd number of tabs that I have open at all times. Let's see. That's actually not that bad. That's not too bad. Okay. Um, Hopefully that works. Is everybody able to see the slideshow okay? Excellent. All right. So yeah, this is kind of I've called this two AMCAS and beyond. It's going to be going kind of step by step through some of the main portions of the application, and I was thinking that we'll use the PowerPoint as kind of a guide, so that we can introduce these topics. Everyone on the panel can kind of share their thoughts on it, broadly speaking, and then as we go through, if anyone has any questions about the specific topic we're on, you're welcome to unmute. You can raise your hand. You can put it in the chat. Really, whatever you're most comfortable with. And we can address it right then and there. And then at the end of the slideshow, we'll have a general Q&A where you can ask us literally anything. And that's another chance for posting a question then too. So I think without any further ado, we already did this part. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So the first thing that I wanted to do is, just in case anyone is unfamiliar, this is a kind of general timeline for things that need to be done to apply and then after applications. So, oops. So let's see. Do I have a little laser pointer? Can I put that on? Ooh, oh no. So I'm like a cat. This is bad. I'm just gonna play with that the whole time. Yeah, so I stole this straight from Kaplan, so you may have seen this timeline before, but as you can see, there are what Kaplan calls ideal timeframes to do certain things, but it's also possible to do it at different times. You know, everyone is kind of on a different schedule. As an example, most people will take the MCAT. Let's say you're a junior right now, a junior pre-med student in college. A lot of them will take it their junior year right around like April or May. But it's totally possible to do it in June or July. These are less ideal just because of when applications go out. As you can see, they start right here. So usually it's earlier to have your MCAT score earlier rather than later. Um, but you know, there's no one size fits. There's no one best proven method of getting into medical school. You know, everyone's pathway is a little different. So if you feel like you need to take some extra time on the MCAT and you take it in June, that's okay. Um, but yeah, generally speaking, take the MCAT first, and then around May or June is when primary applications go out. That's going to be AMCAS, and we'll go through all the components of that. After that gets sent out, I believe sometime in June, programs will, a lot of them will rebound and immediately send you secondary applications. For OU, it's pretty simple. I think it's just, are you interested in the Tulsa program? If so, write a quick little essay, and that's about it. But for other places, you might need to write a bunch of secondary essays on top of what you already submitted specific to that school. So yeah, more work that happens after you've already submitted. And then interviews happen. We'll touch on interviews a little bit. Those are fun. I'm mostly sarcastic about that. Now, some of them can be fun. And then admissions, you'll start getting notified of whether you are accepted, declined, or waitlisted starting as early as October. So that's kind of a general timeline. Let's go through some of these main things more independently. So I've kept that timeline for each thing at the top just to give you kind of a rough idea of when, in terms of scheduling, we're talking about. So the MCAT, does one of our panelists want to share their thoughts really briefly on the MCAT?
I can share some thoughts. I have a part-time job as an MCAT tutor, so I can have some decent advice to say. But if you've never encountered it, never even heard about it, it's medical college admissions test. You can see the 4 sections right there. They're actually out of order. It's chemistry first, and then cars, biology, psychology. But yeah, it's the admissions test. So every application is reviewed holistically, but the MCAT score makes up a good part of it. You want to do well on the test, of course, right? The higher, the better. It is not necessarily required that you're like a biology or a chemistry major to do well in MCAT. I know a lot of people, like engineers who've taken it and done great, right? It's like all standardized tests. It's a critical thinking, reading comprehension, problem solving test, basically. So don't be worried if you're, not a biology major. But yeah, it deals with science. You can tell from these section names, right? They're pretty apparent what the section is about. So having those courses, usually as part of your undergrad requirements, is always good. But the prep work for it, right? Kaplan is one that we've already mentioned. There's Princeton Review. There's a bunch of services, basically. But all of them, or should I say almost all of them, are very exhaustive and really will teach you everything you need to know. So in that preparation phase, you'll really find out your strengths, your weaknesses. And yeah, how to prep, it says how to prep right there. That really is going to be individually tailored, right? There's no magic pill. It's like, oh, you do this, you're going to do great. So you got to find out what works for you. I will say practice tests, in my opinion, are the most high yield thing. Because it's just a long test, right? Like it's a bunch of hours in a row using your brain, which can get exhausting. So taking a practice test is kind of like swinging the bat with a donut on it, right? Like you're getting ready mentally for this big test. And hopefully by the time you're taking it for the real deal, it'll be a walk in the park. You'll feel refreshed and, confident at each point. But yeah, how to prep, yeah, individually tailored, right? Find out what works for you. All 3 of those things, flashcards, practice tests, they're all great. When to take it, you see that little ideal range right there. I will say most people I knew did April, May. I would say that's probably the highest times. I did June. I ended up moving mine. So I was in the non-ideal range, but it doesn't kill you to be there, right? You can apply without scores. So yeah, and scores, a note on scores. So it's a bell curve for the entire population that took it that day. So, oh, nice. There we go. Yeah. So yeah, you see those little bells, right? So everyone who takes it that day gets scored. You get placed on the bell curve. A 50th percentile is a 501, right? 100 percentile, 528. And yeah, you can see OU's numbers, average MCAT 509. So I would say around there, right? If that's average, that's a good score to aim for. Anything above it is only going to help you, right? And don't stress if you're below it because it's still holistic. It's very holistic, right? To be candid with you, I was a reapplicant and I had a great MCAT score, and the other areas were lacking, like the volunteering, the clubs, the leadership, right? So if you're stronger in other areas of application, you you can make up for it. But yeah, dozens of majors in schools, yeah. And I think that's all I really got, unless y'all want to add something about the MCAT.
I was just gonna add that I ended up actually taking the MCAT. So I took a gap year, but I ended up taking the MCAT actually the end of the summer before my senior year. So if you're someone who just wants to get it over and done with, and doesn't want to have to do it during your junior year or senior year, depending on if you're taking a gap year or not, you can do that. I was working, but also was studying over the summer, and I found it really helpful to just get it over and done with, and then not have to worry about it during my senior year. So that's just another option if you're someone who likes to just, who wants to just get it done maybe earlier. So other option.
All right. Thanks to Jack for giving us a good rundown on the MCAT in general. I think really I don't have much more to add. I think it's a tough test, like Jack said, it is more so a critical thinking test. So you kind of have to learn how the exam is, and really problem solve your way through each individual problem as you're studying and doing your practice questions and your exams. But it's also just as much a test of endurance too. I mean, it's 7, 8 hours long. So it's a long thing, and that's why those practice tests are really important as well. I think I was able to find some cheap ones online. I think they were like $10 each. They weren't made by the AAMC, but it was at least something that still had scientific like topics on it, similar to the MCAT, that got my endurance up. And I think leading up to my MCAT date, which I took it, I think May 15th, I think I was doing a full length practice test, like 8 hours every other day to like really get into the rhythm of doing it. So yeah, if anyone has any questions about maybe if obviously doing the Rev Up program is a great way to prep for MCAT. I think there's Kaplan things involved in it. But any other ways to prep for the MCAT? If you have any questions, feel free to ask us. We've got lots of ideas for resources and things. Oh, okay, this is a good question. So panelists, how did you all balance your work and school schedule with also studying for the MCAT?
So I took it junior year, like the standard time, right? But in June. And I actually started prep before winter break. I originally was going to take it in like April, but I didn't feel confident, so I moved it back. But I would say on breaks, like Aditi said, like if you have time where you have less responsibility, it's always a great time to do it. But as far as during the semester, I did it. I'm kind of like I don't know, a goal motivated person, right? Like a to-do list. When I check something off, it get the endorphins, you feel good. So yeah, when I was in the content review phase, it'd be like just read a chapter a day of any of the books, right? There's like subject matter books. Usually there's 7: biology, physics, chemistry, OChem, blah, blah, blah. I'd be like, okay, just 1 chapter a day. That's all I want to do. So I started low, and then as prep picked up and I got closer to the test date, started introducing practice questions, which I would just do those like 10 questions a day. And then weekends, it sucks. There's no way to say it, but you're going to have to find the time to take the practice test, which is 8 hours. So I was never able to do that during the week. So I just chose Saturdays. I was like, I'm going to wake up early because my test was early, right? And I'm going to just take the practice test on Saturday. So that's what I would recommend. But yeah, just give yourself an achievable schedule, right? A lot of times people either start too big, or they start too late. So slow and steady is probably going to treat you the best.
Yeah, I did something similar. I think I took it junior year, and I was taking a lot of really difficult pre-med classes at that point. I was in OChem, I was in physics. It was a tough schedule. So it's hard to find that time to balance it. I think likewise, I took my practice tests on Saturdays usually, and then gave myself Sundays off entirely, I think, or maybe I used Sundays as a day to really deep dive into those practice tests and make sure I understood why I was getting questions wrong. Um, but if I would say you kind of have to, this is a skill that you have to use in med school as well. You kind of have to adapt to what's working for you, your own study habits. If you're trying something and you're recognizing that it's not working very well, you might need to adjust, you might need to adapt, and that's okay. If your school has a like academic counseling center or any kind of resource, you could totally reach out to them and see if that could be helpful. Really anything to kind of help with time management, but sometimes it is a little bit of trial and error. Another question here in the chat says, I know your MCAT score can expire. So if you're planning on taking a gap year or like an extra year of undergrad, how would that affect the test taking timeline? Does anyone have thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I did take a gap year. So kind of what my sort of advisor recommended me was that she said I would plan to, you don't want it sort of more than a year before when you're going to apply. So she was saying, I think the earliest you should probably take it is August of the year you want to apply. And then because I just didn't want to have to worry about studying throughout the year, I essentially, that's why I did the kind of studying. I did like research work during the day, and then I would like kind of study in the evenings. And then like as both Sir Eric and John were saying, would do practice tests on the weekends, usually Saturdays. And so I think usually that's a kind of like a good way to do it. And then you'll have it. I think it's like it's valid, I think, for 3 years, but I think I was just told this may not be right for everyone, but I was told try to do it kind of within the year you're applying. So usually like August, if you're applying in say June of this year, then like August of last year would be maybe the earliest time for that cycle that, you should probably think about taking it. That's just my perspective and what I'd heard.
All right. Thanks for taking that question, Aditi. So I think this is the last slide on the MCAT. I think when I made this slide, I just wanted to point out that the percentile ranking for OU's average score right here is 74th percentile. So that's not crazy high. It's not like you're having to get a 95 on the MCAT. Now, obviously, do as well as you can, but if you get somewhere within this range, you're going to be okay. And last thing that I kind of want to say is there are plenty of people in my class and multiple classes at OU who took the MCAT multiple times, and that's totally fine too. What's important is that you take it when you feel ready to take it, because even if you do have to take it a couple of different times, ideally you're seeing improvement in each attempt. I remember I help out with the interviews sometimes, and I interviewed someone who their first score wasn't that great, but then they took it 2 more times after that, and they improved like incredibly on each attempt, and that demonstrates something about you. It shows that you can persevere, that you can improve your study habits. You can dedicate yourself to really working hard on this thing. So don't be discouraged if the first test isn't quite exactly what you were hoping for. There's still plenty of ways to get into medical school. All right. So I think now we are going to go into the actual application itself. So these are all of the kind of different sections. I made these slides a year ago. I don't expect that they've really changed all that much since then. So let's go in. Let's see what's first. Okay, coursework. So in terms of coursework, I think this is just saying like in terms of having your transcripts on AMCAS, at least the way that it was when I applied, you needed to have it sent directly from your school. My school did it paper or electronic, did it electronically. And then on top of that, I had to input all of my courses and scores manually exactly as it was on my transcript as well. So if you have to do that, just be prepared. It takes a little bit, but yeah, I think that's really all I wanted to say. In terms of like does anyone have thoughts on what kinds of courses folks should be taking in undergrad to prep for the MCAT, to prep for med school? A lot of questions we get sometimes is, should I take anatomy, as an undergrad? What are y'all's thoughts on that?
I
think-
can say that like, oh, sorry.
No, no,
I can say like that as an engineering major, it was kind of hard to take extra courses other than like the pre-med required courses for what I needed to apply to OU. So I personally didn't take anatomy and I was fine. And so if you don't feel like you have the opportunity to, I don't think you need to go out of your way to make it work. But it's obviously nice to add on if you can take some relevant coursework that isn't required.
Yeah, and just to add to that, in my opinion, I think you learn more in a week of medical school than an entire semester of whatever the undergrad course would be. So, like genetics, like 1 week of genetics is your entire course. So they're somewhat helpful in terms of medical school, but they're really helpful in terms of MCAT. I think that's the more like pressing one, like having physics background, having a physics class, even if it's just simple like kinematics and like light circuit work, is going to help you a lot with the CP section. Having biochem will help you with BB, right? So it'll help you for the MCAT. But in terms of med school, I took a gap year and I probably forgot everything by the time I got here, and they teach you well enough to where you can learn it. So I wouldn't worry.
Yeah, just to quickly add, I actually had not taken physics before I took the MCAT, and I learned it all through the course. I also didn't have a really great biochem class in college, so I also kind of relearned everything for the MCAT, and it ended up being okay. You do end up having to spend a little more time than maybe someone who's had that background, but it's definitely manageable, and you can make it work. I think John made a really good point with that. The courses do a good job.
All right. So we've got one question about the MCAT that I missed. I'm sorry. Really quickly, it says, do medical schools super score the MCAT? I'll try to answer this. If you guys know more, please jump in. I think some do. I think some might super score the MCAT. So, it always depends. At least when I was applying, some schools would take your highest score no matter what. Some schools would take your most recent score. So let's say you take it 3 times, you improve on the second attempt, but then you go down a little bit on your third, they would take that third one. Some schools might take an average, it kind of depends. Usually on their websites, the school can list that. Does anybody else know more?
I would agree. School dependent, but most people take, I don't know, probably most recent, I feel like. Because people, which is usually the highest, because usually you're retaking it until like you get a high score and then you stop taking it. That makes sense. But yeah.
I don't think it's really common. I think I have heard of like some schools that do it, but I wouldn't rely on that as like a benchmark.
Yeah, I would say if you're concerned about that, check a school's website. And then even then, if it's not on the website and you're still, not sure about it, you probably reach out to someone in their admissions department and they would be able to tell you. Okay, what kinds of classes are taught during the first year of medical school? Great question.
I think
can
the
take
first
that.
year should answer, right?
So it kind of depends and varies on what school you go to. I know that not everyone here is applying to OU, and it's also kind of the curriculum at OU is changing a bit too. So I don't know how long this will be relevant. But as far as when we started, we took anatomy, then we took foundations of medicine, which is kind of like a genetics type course. And then we just go into system by system. So you'll go into like GI and you'll go into like cardio and you'll learn all of the things for that one system and then move on to the next.
And just like adding on to that, so you are taking kind of your general sort of, you do like anatomy and then you go into foundations, just like Amber was saying, and then into systems. So we're doing immunology right now. And now we're kind of transitioning into microbiology. But you also take other courses on top of that. So you take a clinical medicine course, which is essentially you sort of really learn sort of the applications, like the clinical parts of medicine. So you get to work with standardized patients. So they're just kind of people who come in and volunteer their time to learn how to be kind of patients for different scenarios. And sort of you learn how to do the medical interview and different physical exams. And sort of they teach you different things every week, and then you have a quiz based on what you're learning. So that's like one class, and then you have another class that you take your first semester called a DACR, and it's kind of like a research-based class, and they teach you a lot about like epidemiology, like research-based things that you sort of use a lot in epidemiology, and just about like little basic stats. And then you also, and that's just first semester, and then you have patients and physicians in society, which is kind of taught a lot by like sort of current doctors, and they kind of teach you about sort of just how clinical practices work, like about insurance, about sort of about a lot of the behavioral components of healthcare, like how to empathize and the different things that you may not cover in sort of like your heavier like science courses. So that's just to give you a little kind of the different classes we're covering right now.
Next question is really, really good, really relevant to this slide. Is it a good idea to retake a course from undergrad so that the courses look better when you're applying?
I honestly have no idea. I've never thought of that. I think, I don't know. Has anyone here done that? Any of y'all do that?
So I have not done that, but I mean, again, this is just like one advisor perspective. So just from what my advisor had consulted me was, it kind of depends, but they said no, because it's still going to be kind of in your transcript, like they'll still see it. So a lot of people sort of what they did is they would take sort of other more advanced courses and kind of show like, oh, okay, I've learned from that and I was able to sort of figure out what I did wrong in that course and then take this more advanced course and did better and like use that as like showing a kind of a growth and like resilience, which I know is really important. So I'd heard that, or people doing their masters showing like, they were able to kind of re-engage with that content and learn how to figure it out. But that's just kind of, again, one perspective that I'd heard.
And I can speak to a little bit about what admission says specifically about this. So if the course decreases your science GPA by a lot, it's possible they would recommend retaking it. But if it doesn't hit your science GPA that much, the chances are if your application is balanced, you'll probably get the chance to talk about it during an interview. So just be prepared to answer a question about an interview and basically how you've improved.
All right, let's keep moving on with our slideshow. Dave, I see your question in the chat. We talked about the MCAT a little bit, so if it's okay with you, we'll get to that towards the end in the more general section, but I won't forget, I promise. Okay, so next, let's talk about work and activities. So like basically the things that you use to fill out your application. This is the more like holistic approach that medical schools take, where in addition to your MCAT and GPA, this is where you can really show who you are, the things that you've worked on, the projects that you're passionate about. So really, there's a ton of different sections. There's really, you can put anything on here, but the main kind of overall topics are volunteering, and that can be like medically related or not. Work experience, again, like in a clinical setting or not. Research, extracurriculars, hobbies. So yeah, I wouldn't say there's really, at least my impression of the admissions committee, I wouldn't say there's one of these that holds more weight than the other. Maybe more so these top three, volunteering, work, research. But if you feel like, oh, I'm really strong in research, but maybe I don't have a ton of work experience, or oh, I volunteer all the time, but I've done no research. I think that's okay. It's if you have even a little bit of these three, and maybe one that you really are passionate about. You've done a lot for whatever organization you're a part of with that. You know, I think it's almost more so a quality over quantity type thing because you know, if someone asks you about a research project that you were involved in during your interview, but you know, maybe you didn't really do as much on that project as maybe you put in your application, your answer is going to kind of fall through and they'll be able to see that. But if it was a project that really you did a lot, you were passionate about, you put a lot of time and effort into it, that's going to show and that's going to shine through. So the whole point is that use these to show your best qualities, you know. Um, for our panelists, were there any particular um, experiences or portions of your application that fell under these categories that you included that you were asked about in your interview or that you thought was really meaningful?
I'm trying to
I feel like
remember what I was asked about in my interview. I think if you put research down, you'll definitely be asked about it and they'll be able to tell how involved you were, you know. So make sure that if you do put that down, that you were involved to a degree where you can answer questions. My biggest thing I think for this section is not to compare yourself to other people. I kind of got stuck in that trap and it was like, oh, well, this person has like 10 publications and this and that, and I have this. Everyone's varies, everyone has different strong suits, different interests. So don't compare yourself to others. Just try to do the best that you can in each section.
Yeah, I was gonna say, um, typically they're gonna pick out like, at least for my application, whatever I don't know, wrote the most about, or even just like wrote, they could tell like I was interested in it. They asked me about those things, right? So one of them was like a work experience, and I made in my application, it was like very important to me and formative in my journey to medicine. And so I always got asked about that. Um, so and I didn't have any research, so I have no comment on that one. But yeah, they typically are going to try and find like, okay, if this person wrote 2 paragraphs about everything and 4 paragraphs about one, they're going to ask you about that. So, and you have the freedom to talk about what's important to you, right? Like, it's a two-way conversation. The interview, it's not interrogation, it's interview, right? So if you have something you're really proud of or you think is exemplary of how you're going to be a good student, then any question can lead to that, basically, right? Just push the conversation towards whatever that thing is.
Yeah, and I think like just adding on to that too, it also doesn't have to be medicine related. I think like in my OU interview, like at the end, I spent a lot of time talking about like a YouTube channel I created with my first year roommate, and they were like, "Oh, what's the channel? Can you give us like the name and stuff?" And so I think it's sometimes fun also to like highlight other things that you're interested in because I think they also kind of want to know like, hey, like what are other things that you're interested in? And it's also a good way of showing that you know how to deal with like stress and like cope with that and like what are your strategies that you have for that. So I think also being able to delve into a little bit about like other things that you do that maybe aren't current like a volunteering or clinical experience or research can be a fun way too to like engage also with the schools and also with the people who are interviewing you.
So we have a question here that I think it's a great question, and it ties into kind of a more general topic about what kinds of activities maybe applicants should be trying to look for. It says, is it important to get a job that's related to the medical field instead of something that's not, like fast food, for example? And I'll answer first. I would say that um, essentially, when you write your personal statement as part of this application, which they're going to read, um, the the prompt that you're writing to is the question, why medicine? Essentially, like, tell us a little bit about your journey to getting you know, into the medical or to wanting to get into the medical field. What are your intentions? Maybe what are you hoping to do as a doctor? So that's personal statement. And your working activities is where you show you demonstrate the qualities that will be helpful for you in medical school. It's where you can show, hey, I was involved in this and we had a really tough time with this project, but then we worked as a team. We persevered and we made something really great from it. You know, basically things to show your leadership, your teamwork, your empathy, all of those things that you really need to be a good quality doctor. So to answer your question about getting work experience or volunteering or research that is medically related or not, I would say if you feel like you need to have a little bit more of a stronger grasp on that why medicine question, then yeah, it's not, it'd be great to do something in the medical field to get more exposure. That way you have a good answer for that. Outside of that, if that fast food job or whatever experience you're wanting to write about was important to you and you feel like it demonstrates a good quality about you, then absolutely you should include that. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I think what one of my mentors told me was basically your application is a story and you get to choose what parts of the story are included. And if you feel like the story helps you and shows you in a good light and, demonstrates some quality, then do it, right? If you feel like you can have that fast food job and not just be like, yeah, I had a fast food job, I don't know. Like if you can't say anything about it, then no, it's probably better to go medical to where at least it's in the field and it's kind of easier to segue it into, and I just love medicine so much. I was even working as a nurse aide. I don't know. But yeah, if you feel like there's something valuable and there's something you actually learned, like genuinely, like don't feel like you have to make something up, but like genuinely you feel like you grew as a person, then yeah, right? I'd say that's great. As long as you can talk about it, as long as you can demonstrate and show why it helped you and why it makes you a good student.
Next question here. Could having a lot of research experiences potentially deter our acceptance to a med school that isn't as involved with research because they might not view the application as a good fit for them? What do y'all think?
I think kind of just what John was mentioning. I think, research, it's not just about kind of the research, it's about what it demonstrates too. So, if you're, for example, leading a research project or you've been writing, it says a lot about you as in terms of your ability to collaborate with others, your ability to take control of a project, to problem solve. So when I did sort of some research during my sort of pre-med experience, and I used it a lot to, it was medical related, but also I use it to highlight things like problem solving skills and collaboration and leadership, which are like really important, just like skills to show to like admission committees. So I think even if you feel like, oh, it's maybe not medical related or it's just a lot of research, I think you can also really like highlight the types of skills that it sort of reinforces. And so I think I don't think it's detrimental. I think it's always good to have some sort of like clinical experience as well to show that you want to do like clinical stuff as well. But I don't think it would be detrimental to have too many or things like that, personally.
I agree. I also think it depends on the way you frame things. So like a main thing in my application was the research I've done and the work I've done as a biomedical engineer, why I want to pivot away from that and why I want to go to medicine instead, so using it as a jumping off point to kind of show why you want to be a clinician, why you want to be more involved in that world, I think works.
Would you recommend putting campus jobs or work study positions on your application?
Yes, it shows resilience, responsibility, dependability. Those are always good things. Anytime you can show, because if you think about it, right, the best students are able to do school and then also research or volunteering or extracurriculars. I say the best. What residencies are looking at, right? They want to see that not only you can handle the coursework, but you can take on responsibilities outside that and excel, right? So I would say that's exactly what a campus job is showing. You're not only getting through undergrad, but you're working and you're juggling it all and you're doing great. So.
Yep, to kind of round out the whole conversation about what you're putting on your application, I would say if it is significant to you, then that is worth considering to put on your application. If you can speak volumes to it in an interview, I think it can only help you. Having a few things that are medically related are always good because that's going to interest those interviewers, and it'll show that you have exposure to the field. But really anything that you feel like you can talk at length about and energetically about, that's going to be golden. And it doesn't have to be. I think you can have up to 10 working activities. You don't necessarily have to put all 10. I did just because I was nervous about it, but I've seen applications where there were only maybe 7, and that's okay. You know, as long as there's something of substance to all of those things, then that's good. All right, let's keep on going. Letters of recommendation. So yeah, this is a key component of your overall AMCAS application. I think you can have up to 10, so that's a lot. And schools like to see that if you're applying through AMCAS, you're applying to MD schools. So they would like to see that your letters are written by someone who knows you well, and they are preferably MDs. If they're a DO, or if say you've worked with a PA or someone else in the healthcare field and they know you really well, that could still be good. But preferably MDs. And then also a lot of schools have a pre-med committee. I went to Tulsa, University of Tulsa, and there they created a letter packet where it was like you asked 3 faculty for letters from each of them, and then our pre-med advisor would write you a 4th letter, and then the committee as a whole would do a like combined mega 5th letter or something like that. But that was basically what the committee did. I know OU does it slightly differently. Other schools had different ways of doing it, but essentially, if you are at an undergrad institution right now and you're not sure what it looks like for your pre-med committee, or even if you have a pre-med committee, that's definitely something to reach out about and start inquiring about now, because usually I think they're quite helpful, but yeah. Letters of rec. What are y'all's thoughts on letters of recommendation? How many did you have? Who did you ask? When did you ask? You know, all those things.
The advice I was given was 1 science, 1 doctor, and committee. So I think that's what I ended up doing. For science, I really just, I don't know, my favorite teacher, my favorite professor. I ended up just, I went to her office hours a couple times, so I didn't feel awkward emailing her like, hey, you know, can you write me a letter of rec? But ideally, the more they actually know you, the better, right? So someone that you did research with, that's perfect. Someone that you shadowed a bunch, that's perfect. So you want them to be able to actually, you know, you don't want just a boilerplate letter of recommendation that's like, they're a great student, excels, blah, blah, blah. So, but yeah, up to 10, I mean, I think quality over quantity, in my opinion. If you just had 10 letters from people you vaguely knew, I'd rather have just 1 really great one from your, you know, I don't know, closest professor. Yeah, and OU, if you're at OU, we do have a pre-med committee, and I didn't know that. And you definitely need to do that. Because yeah, they'd like you to do that. So
And it's also okay if they don't have a pre-med committee. My institution did not have a pre-med committee, and it's not gonna, I don't think it's gonna take away, it won't take away from your application. So just like, it's also okay if you're at an institution that doesn't. And yeah, I would say like, also if you know someone and you're like pretty, even if it's like early on, you're like not even close to applying and like, you're like, oh, this is a person that I've like developed a rapport with. It's okay to like ask early as well and be like, hey, like this is kind of in the future for me, but I've developed such a great connection with you and I really look up to you as a mentor, and like would you be okay to write my letter of recommendation later? So I would say it never hurts to even ask a little early if you know this person is going to be like as a formative person for you in your sort of path to medicine.
yeah, the earlier the better, honestly. I mean, professors, doctors are all busy, right? So they all want to write it for you, but they have priorities. So the sooner you can do it, the better. And don't feel bad about sending like reminders. I'll say that as well. Like if it's been a month and you asked early, so you're like not pressed for time, but you're getting kind of worried, just send an email and be like, hey, hope this reaches you well. I wanted to know, just say like, do you need any more information, right? Like, do you want me to send you updated CV for the letter? And that's kind of a gentle way of being like, I'm still here, help me out. So, and that's why it helps to know them. Because if you actually know them, you can just be like, hey doc, like I have to submit the letter soon. Like, would you able to do that? And then it's easy. So
Yeah, there's certainly a kind of an art form to asking and then maintaining those relationships for letters of rec in terms of just following up if it's been a little bit. For me, yeah, I'd say always the earlier the better for sure. Even if it's just early on in your working relationship, say you just went on this research project and after a week and a half, 2 weeks, you think they'd be a good one to reach out to. There's nothing wrong with just like Aditi said, of just saying like, yeah, hey, I think we're working well together. My application for med school is coming up. I was thinking maybe towards the end of this month or whenever, maybe you could consider possibly writing me a strong letter of recommendation. Always good to use the word strong because some people will be like, sure, I'll let you write a letter, but then if they don't really know you very well, it's not very helpful. And that actually looks worse on your application if it's more of a general, like vague letter, and the committee can see if the person doesn't really know you very well. When asking for rec letters, could asking people from volunteering experiences help?
yes, if they know you well, and yeah, it's anyone, right? Like, don't feel like you have to box into like a specific thing. You'd like to grab a doctor, you'd like to grab a professor, but if your manager at work has seen you grow as a person, like who better to write a letter of recommendation, right? So yeah, volunteering would be great.
Do committee letters hold a higher value compared to individual letters? What do y'all think about that?
I've heard some people say that they do. I honestly think it really depends. Personally, when applying to OU, I didn't get a committee letter. I just asked 3 people that I knew really well and I knew could write me strong letters of recommendation to write them. So I think it really depends on how well do you know professors, doctors, people that can write letters for you, and where are you in terms of which do you think would serve you better. But I don't know officially what the stance is on that.
Yeah, I was gonna say also, like my school again did not do committee letters. So and I think it was okay. And I think a lot of schools do not do committee letters. So I think med schools do know that. So I've heard that if it's offered, it's a good thing to ask and make sure you have it. But again, if you're at a school like mine that doesn't have it, you're okay. Like you're not gonna be behind other students.
Yeah, and similarly, there are plenty of people who I know a person who in my class here in the MD program who they knew about TU's committee, pre-med committee, and they chose to not do that. They felt like they had enough individual letter writers who knew them well, kind of outside of that committee, and they got into medical school just fine. So, there's multiple ways to do it. Just like everything in life, the answer is it depends. All right, personal statement. So another pretty significant component of the application. I think a lot of people who are applying really stress out a lot about this because it's a one-page essay, but you have the chance to say a lot in that one page, and it's a good way to kind of get your voice across to the pre-med or to, I'm sorry, we're talking about pre-med committees, to the admissions committee. Um, it's their way of seeing kind of how you express yourself, what things are important to you, and you're answering that one question of why medicine. Now, it doesn't have to be your entire life story. Usually, it's one, maybe two significant examples, like a story, where you can point to and say, "This was really important to me. This is why I want to be a doctor." It's something that does get asked about in interviews, but I don't know. I think I wrote a little blurb here when I made this slide that says, Try to make it unique and memorable without being over dramatic. You don't have to write the next great American novel here. You can have something that is unique to you, an experience that was good and important. But it doesn't need to have 1,000 metaphors and similes. It can if you're creative and you want to do it that way. But some people, the committee, when they're reading all these applications, they're going through, hundreds of applications. They're having to read a lot of these. And there are some times where a personal statement is a little bit too much. And that can actually sort of reflect negatively, where you want someone to remember your personal statement in a good way and not in a bad way. But if they don't remember it at all, sometimes that's okay too, because the rest of your application still shines. Yeah, essentially what I'm getting at is if you are concerned at all about your personal statement, it never hurts to have someone take a look at it. That's why I have here revise, revise, revise. I think I went through like at least 10 iterations of my personal statement. And even towards the end, I still wasn't perfectly happy with it. But I showed it to everybody. I showed it to my letter writers, if they were willing to take a quick look at it and do some revisions, especially if they were in the medical field. They've gone through this process before. I showed it to my mom. I showed it to like everybody, close friends who are good with grammar. The more eyes that take a look at it, I think the better. But at the same time, it's your personal statement. So if you feel like it's getting revised by some other folks to the point where it's not your voice anymore, or it's not the way that you want to present yourself, just be mindful of that. It's at the end of the day, you decide what goes on this application. Yeah. Any other thoughts on personal statement?
I would say try and, I don't know, speak from the heart. Sounds corny, but it's easy to write something that you think they want to hear. Like, I save kittens on the regular, and like I've got this bleeding heart for medicine, and I get giddy at the thought of, taking care of people, which is probably true, right? I'm hoping that you are excited the idea of being a doctor if you're planning medical school, of course. But I feel like everyone on their first step kind of writes that, right? They're like, okay, what makes me sound the best? And really, they just want to get to know you, right? Because until they read the personal statement, they have like an ID number, and maybe they have like a photo of your face, but like really you're just another applicant until they read the personal statement. And then they're like, okay, this is what this person wanted me to know about themselves. And of course you want to put yourself in a good light, but just, like be honest, like talk about who you are, what you want to do. Yeah. Don't, I don't know. It's not like you're writing an essay for a grade, right? No one's going to grade you. They're just going to see, do they know you better after? And did they like what they read? So.
And I did just want to give about a 5-minute warning. We'll probably want to hop off at 5:45 because our Rev Up students actually have an MCAT session tonight. So I'll just leave that to you, Eric.
Okay, sounds good. Well, let's keep trucking along here. I think we have quite a few more topics, but we can maybe speak real briefly on them. So secondary applications, like I said, these are kind of the apps that after you have compiled all of those things that we've talked about and you put them in your AMCAS, you sent that out to all of the schools. A lot of them will immediately send you an email, kind of kicking it right back to you and say, hey, thanks for applying. Here's more things to do. Usually that is going to be more essays. So just kind of like briefly, these secondary essays, a lot of them fall into these categories. So one about diversity, one about a significant challenge that you've had in life. A lot of schools want to know, hey, why did you apply specifically to us? That's your chance to say, hey, I've got family here, or, oh, I've always wanted to go to the East Coast, or something like that. Leadership, yeah, just anything like that. So yeah, it's a lot, it's more writing, and you can try to prep some of these ahead of time. If maybe you can look online on like Reddit or Student Doctor Network or something like that. If you know a school has a long history of having these secondary essays and it's always consistent, oh, they always have a diversity essay, they always have a gap year essay or something like that. It doesn't hurt to go ahead and try to prep one of those, but yeah, that's about it for that. Ooh, interviews. Interviews are fun. Does anybody want to like just touch really briefly on medical school interviews?
In brief, they're gonna a lot of times they ask you the same questions they ask you on secondary. I know it feels pointless, but they usually ask you a diversity question. They usually ask you a challenge question. What's your greatest weakness? Right? It's kind of like a job interview. Some of the same general questions if you've done job interviews. I would say in this era of online interviewing, it's good because you don't have to fly to all these places. But definitely try and get some good lighting. Like my lighting right now is pretty terrible. Like my face is all blue, right? So point a lamp at yourself. I don't know. I'm not good at it. I had my wife give me her like ring light and lit myself up. But and smile. It's like a lot of times when you're on Zoom, you're like looking at yourself or looking at them. And it feels unnatural to just smile, but it makes you more inviting. The more you can just keep a smile on your face, the better.
I would just like quickly say, just have fun with it. I know there can be like a lot of pressure, like you're like, oh my gosh, it's an interview. But I think for me, the best that I did was when I went in and I was like, I'm just getting to talk with someone and getting to like tell them a little bit about me, and it's just a conversation. And so I went in with like taking off that pressure. It just made it flow better, just like having a conversation, like feeling it as if it's just like a conversation rather than putting a lot of pressure. I have to cover this, this, and this. And then usually you can talk about things maybe you wouldn't necessarily have talked about, like they wouldn't have asked you about. So sometimes I think just kind of going and being like, yeah, it's a conversation with another person. They're getting to know about you. You're getting to know a little bit about them in the school. So kind of, that kind of helps.
Definitely a great approach. I remember I was a nervous wreck on the day of my interview, but I still did have fun with it. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, I think actually that was about it. Oh yeah, look, I have a little gif of a dog at the end. Okay, thank you all so much for coming. I want to give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all for spending time with everyone today. If you still have questions, I'm sure there's probably a couple more questions. I'm sorry we couldn't maybe get to all of them, but oh man, there was that one that I promised I'd get to. I'm so sorry. But you're always welcome to reach out to any of us. I'm going to put my email in the chat. I'm always happy to talk about anything, to email, text, Zoom, anything. Please reach out to us. We're here to help you all. And yeah, best of luck with your MCAT session and on the journey to med school.
Thank you so much, Eric. I appreciate all the panelists being on here and of course our participants. So I'll send out a recording so that you all have access to this. And if there's any questions that you didn't get answer, like Eric said, you're welcome to reach out to the panelists. You can reach out to me as well, and we'll be sure we can answer for you all. But you have a good evening. Have a good MCAT class. Bye, everyone.